First of all, I wanted to say that I agree with Mr. Michaud's original point, which is that making a criticism of AI based on the fact that anyone who uses AI must be stupid and being stupid is bad, that's an ableist critique. This whole thing began, I believe, with a creator who was exposed for using generative AI to help him write scripts, I believe. And then a lot of people in his comments were calling him a fraud or saying he was dumb or saying that he didn't deserve the money or the fame or whatever he gained from being an influencer because he was using generative AI. And if you need generative AI, then you must be stupid and being stupid is bad. Which, saying that being stupid is bad is ableist. I'm pretty pro being stupid myself, honestly. And for the people who were criticizing this person, if your problem with AI is the environmental impact, then bring up the environmental impact. Don't bring up the person's intelligence level and what their worth is relative to that intelligence level. Yeah, the argument morphed a little bit from this discussion of saying that this is an ableist critique of AI to people talking about the data centers, and that's why AI is bad. And this is where Mr. Michaud loses me a little bit, because then he starts making an argument that, well, if you're so against AI and if you're so against data centers, then why are you here using this app where there are tons of AI features? And I think there's like two key things that make that kind of different. One is the difference between generative AI and what I'm going to call discriminative AI. I read this really good article talking about, it's not amazing, but it's a good article, talking about the difference between the environmental impact of generative AI versus discriminative AI. For example, many people aren't necessarily against AI that is used, for example, in cancer research to like examine two images and say, oh, this one probably has cancer, this one probably doesn't have cancer. I don't think anyone's like, stop using that. Because that's discriminative AI, right? It really provides an almost Boolean yes or no response to whatever input it gets, rather than having to go into this large data set and provide you an answer that is not only accurate but also sounds human and is like quirky so that you keep using ChatGPT, you know? And the thing is, most other types of AI that are not generative AI are computationally much cheaper, and since they are cheaper, that means they don't take as much energy, and since they don't take as much energy, the environmental impact is lower. So even if we're all using the same data centers, not all of us are pulling the same amount of energy from it, you know? I saw a post once where someone was talking about how like sending one prompt to ChatGPT is like opening a water bottle and just dumping it outside. Because the problem with the energy cost isn't only that it costs energy, is that the more energy the computer is processing, the hotter it gets, and the more water it needs to cool it down. And then that's an even more limited resource than energy, you know? And I think what a lot of people who are criticizing the use of generative AI themselves don't use generative AI. So they're not pooling as much as on those data centers. So their own environmental impact is lower. So it does make sense that they're criticizing the people who are using generative AI, especially in frivolous ways. One thing that I think is not great about this argument that like, oh, people should stop using generative AI is because I feel like the logic it follows, like if we don't use generative AI, then all these companies will stop making generative AI products, which will be good for the environment, right? Because it's not only the prompts that have a higher environmental impact, even just training the large language models, that also has a really big environmental impact. The thing is, that's simply not true. Companies are simply not making features based on what users want. You can say as much as you want, like, oh, if no one uses the generative AI stuff, then the companies will eventually stop. And that's not true, sweetheart. They're gonna keep pushing it because they love it, because of all the reasons that we know they love it, because it's so good for capitalism. So then that's why I don't really agree with the people coming at Mr. Michaud in his comments either, because I don't agree that yelling at people to not use generative AI will actually make companies not make generative AI and will actually decrease the environmental impact. I think it's a pretty bad way to go about doing that. Which also brings me at another point of Mr. Michaud's that I agree with, which is basically I'm never gonna tell disabled people how to live their life. I think most people don't understand the amount of like calculations and estimations you have to do when you're disabled, you know? So you might think, oh, it doesn't even take that long to do XYZ thing that the person's using generative AI to do. But it's like, you don't know how long it takes someone else. You don't know what else they've got going on in their day. You don't know how hard it is for them to do various tasks, you know? And I feel like people on Tumblr like really hit really hard on this. Like, if you're disabled, you still shouldn't use AI. Here are some other alternatives. And it's like, okay, but those alternatives aren't accessible always. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I do think each of us does have a responsibility to try to use the products that are available to us in an ethical way. And all of us fall short of that in some way or another, which I think is also sort of what Mr. Michaud is saying when he's talking about like, oh, you use an app that uses AI features, you know? We all make some compromises in some way or another, and I don't think like I can tell another person what compromises they should be making because I don't live their lives. I think it's better for each responsible for our own selves, and we put our hands on our hearts and like, okay, do I really need to do this? And then truly the pressure should be on these companies to one, be more transparent about their energy usage, because a lot of this has to be like estimatives because they don't release information about their carbon footprint or how much energy it takes. So a lot of it is estimates from like people who know what they're talking about, like computer scientists and stuff like that. But still, it would be better if we had access to information from these companies so more informed decisions could be made. And I think another possible solution or like an interesting maybe thought experiment to think about. What if AI was made like totally environmentally friendly? The energy it uses is green energy, solar or whatever, and then the water it uses just becomes fully recycled water with no impact. I think a lot of these people would still have an issue with it because a lot of these conversations that are around AI are driven by the fact that it feels kind of icky. You know, it does. It feels icky to me. And I think we should all be honest with ourselves that, like, sure, the environmental impact is a concern, but you're upset because AI feels icky, and that is shown very clearly when someone uses random ass cat wants to be part of the conversation as well. Let me know what you guys think of his points. And it is obvious that your hatred of AI isn't primarily about the environmentalism because when someone is exposed for using AI, you don't go for the environmentalist arguments. You go for the you're a bad person argument, you're stupid argument because it feels icky to you. I don't like AI. I don't use generative AI. I've never used any generative AI. I think all of us should, as much as we can, avoid using generative AI in our lives. And I believe that for a variety of reasons. The environmental impact is certainly one of them. But to me, even the biggest thing is that I don't like AI generated stuff that much. There's these guys' videos, right? And obviously a lot of people like them, so it was good. But I think it was good because of the ideas and creativity and originality that the creator, I think his name was Justin, can't really remember. So that this creator, Justin, was bringing to his videos. That's what made his videos good. It wasn't the AI organizing his thoughts for him or helping him write the script. If it was a fully AI video, I don't think it would have gotten popular. Even stuff that people are like, wow, AI made this and it's so beautiful, I often don't really like it. And to me, the root of it is anything an AI can do, a human can also do. But not everything that a human can do, an AI can do. Why are people acting like AIs can replace humans? You know, they like obviously can't. So that's my personal issue with AI, you know, just to be open and honest about my own biases coming into this conversation. I would call myself anti-AI. I don't think anyone should use it, but I'm also not gonna act like I know what it's like to live someone else's life because I don't. So those are pretty much my thoughts. My name is Thais. This is The Laughter Salad. Thanks for watching and like and subscribe.